evening, and welcome to Nite Callers Bigfoot Radio. It is January 20th, 2019, and you're here with your hosts, Lauren Smith and Lori Hood. How are you doing tonight, Lori?
I was doing fine, but I was just kind of fight this tickle in my throat. You know how it'll just sneak up on you, and you're like, I don't want to cough during the intro, and then it's like, ah.
Yeah, it happens to me every time.
No.
So,
no,
besides
actually, I'm doing great.
Oh, good. So, usually, here's where I ask if there's anything new going on, and I happen to know there is because you posted it on our Nite Callers Facebook page, which, if nobody or if you guys listening out there have not liked our Facebook page, now would be the time to go do so, as that's where we upload our future guests that we're having on, as well as updates about show times. And Lori has shared with us a recording that she took of a very odd-sounding animal in her backyard, pretty much. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Actually, I recorded this like right before Christmas, that I have actually been so busy that I have not reviewed any of the audio. So when I was reviewing it right away, I noticed I had captured something. The odd thing about it is when I listened to it, I thought, I didn't know what it was initially, but I do know that putting it on the Nite Callers page, some people say it's an elk, and then some people say it's a coyote. And then there were a few that thought it was a Sasquatch. So I'm gonna play it, and I'm gonna let everyone out there hear it. And if you think you know what it is, please go over and post your idea of what you think it is over on our Nite Callers Facebook page. Okay? So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and play it. Okay.
The more... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, what did you say?
I was just going to say, every time I hear it, all I can think is an elk. And then I think about East Texas, and I mean, there's just not elk there. I mean, yes, there are herds in Oklahoma, and there are herds in Arkansas, and yeah, there might be a game ranch, but it's about as likely for an elk to be in the East Texas woods as a Sasquatch.
Well, we do have trophy ranches, and we do have ranches that have elk on it, but none are close. Probably the nearest one to where I live is about 8 miles away. And is it possible one escaped or somebody, but I don't think it's an elk. The more and more I listen to it, the more and more it sounds kind of canine to me, like possibly a dog or even a coyote. Although I have been recording coyotes here for a long time, and I've never heard one that sounded like that. Mm-hmm. So actually, I've never recorded anything that sounded like that. So I just thought I would throw it up there and see if anybody can identify it, and so it's kind of fun just to listen to, and it's kind of fun. So.
And, you know, and so you did send that to someone for analysis, correct?
Yes, but I haven't heard back.
Okay.
I sent it to Andrew Meisinger with the Sawdust Beast, and they put it on SoundForge and do an analysis and all of this, and but I haven't heard anything back as to whether it falls under canine or something else, you know. Mm-hmm.
So we'll update everyone when we do hear back, what, you know, if they figured out what it was or whether it came back unknown, or if it comes back as an elk, then, you know, then we know there's some elk in the area. But
also something else that I might want to mention, you know, that Sasquatch are notorious for morphing from one animal to another in their imitation.
Yeah.
Mimicry. And so it's you know, could it be a Sasquatch? Maybe it is. You know, this area is known for them. So, also, before we bring on our guest, we want to apologize for last week. We had some technical difficulties. The show would not allow the host to call in. It would allow me to call in, but it wouldn't allow the actual radio host, you know, the one that controls the show, to even call in. So the guest showed up, I showed up, but the show was just like, no, Lauren, you can't call in. You can't plug in, you can't call in, you can't do anything. So we had to cancel the show and reschedule it. So tonight we have David Parker Part 2, which we're going to get to in just a second. I just want to remind everyone out there, if you're listening to the show live, tonight is the night of the super moon lunar eclipse, wolf moon, super wolf moon lunar eclipse. Is that right? Yeah.
I
think that's what they call it. Yes. But anyway, it starts right after this show, 9:33. It should start. So get your cameras charged up, get ready. It's going to be cold, but get out there and get some pictures of this. Don't think we're going to have another one for 3 or 4 years. So enjoy. Lauren, did you have anything to share?
No, not really. Just, you know, still living the dream up here. No squatching. Plan to get my squatch on next, you know, in the upcoming months, but it's January and I have not been squatching in a few months, so I've got nothing to contribute. I'm sorry. I'm going to piggyback off of your awesome audio that you shared.
Well, hopefully very soon we'll be doing some squatching, Lauren, and then we'll have something to talk about, right?
Yes, I'm okay with that. All right,
are
you ready?
Me too. Yes.
Okay.
Bring on Mr. Parker.
I'm trying. Okay. Okay. David, are you there?
Yeah. I heard something go beep, so I figured that must mean that we're on.
Yeah, we're on. So how are you doing tonight?
Oh, trying to keep warm. It's only 5 degrees where I'm at.
Oh, my gosh. And where are you?
Oh, I'm up in the north end of Missouri.
Okay. All right.
Pretty close to the Iowa border.
Did you guys get snow?
Is that coming our way?
No.
Oh, yeah, we got snow. We got about 3 batches of it. It was like snowed, and then it kind of got everything all slick and melted some, and then it snowed again. We got a couple inches, and then it was snowing earlier today. I hope it stopped.
Yeah.
I personally as far as I'm concerned, I like to see a little snow around Christmas Eve, like about 2 inches, to make trees look pretty. And I could live without it for the whole rest of the year.
Yes, agreed. I'm not a snow and ice person either. I'm just not a fan. Mostly because no one else in Oklahoma knows how to drive in it, and it's annoying.
Yeah.
Well, down here it's the same way.
Do what? I'm sorry.
I said I grew up in South Dakota. We got used to getting a lot of snow.
Yeah, I bet.
Well, they're just all flat, and the wind blows it into big drifts everywhere.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't imagine. I barely survived this as it is.
We get an inch or two, and they just shut the whole city down. Schools closed. Nobody drives. But it's because snow is a very rare event this far south, and people just don't know how to drive on it, and they're scared to death of it. And so we get snow days, so those are the days we get to go out there and play and make snow angels and try to build snowmen and things like that. So it's pretty cool. But, of course, we don't get it very often, but it's special when we do. So do you have much Sasquatch activity when it snows?
Well, it's hard to tell because usually when it snows and the weather's all like this, they seem to stay a little more deeper woods. And when it's like this, I really don't go out there because unless I have a real, an important need to go outside at all, period. I just don't do winter well.
I understand that.
I like to try and record them and stuff, but, when it's really cold like that, batteries don't hold up very long at all. And it's so hard to get any kind of decent recording. Now, one of yours, does the recording sound like what you heard?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Well, now your recording of that, it kind of sounds like an elk, but it kind of sounds like a howl mixed together.
Yeah. Yes.
Now, is that how it sounded when you heard it?
I never did hear it.
The things that you hear, they don't come out on the recording sounding quite the same. Now, here's an example.
I agree completely.
One time, there was a female by the barn, and she was doing like owl calls. And then she'd throw something as a distraction and move closer to the house. And she did that like 3 times. And then she was on the west side of my house, and I was standing on the deck on the east side, and she screamed like a woman 3 times. Just like real emotional. And I had recorded it, and when I played back the recording, it didn't sound like a woman screaming. It sounded more like whoops.
Wow.
I've talked to people where they kind of hear one thing, and then the recording, they hear something that sounds quite a bit different. That's why I was wondering, for example, like your recording, if that's what it sounded like to you when you heard it. And
no, actually, I had set up my recorder early, about 10 o'clock in the evening, and had gone to bed. So this actually occurred somewhere like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was asleep. So it just recorded it. I never actually heard it. And and I've never heard anything like that. And haven't recorded. I've been recording ever since. And, of course, maybe I missed my window. If I had known that I had recorded that, I would have been recording through the holidays, but I didn't. So maybe whatever that was left the area, because I've been trying to record ever since, and I haven't got it again. I would love to have a a different recording of it so that possibly I could determine exactly what it is. But that's all I got right there.
It could be a Bigfoot imitating an elk, too. I mean, they mimic everything.
Exactly. Yes.
Now,
and I have heard that.
I've even heard them where I believe it was them mimicking a bullfrog. There's one time where they like to hang out on the ridge that's to the east of my place. One time I was getting calls, and it sounded like a bullfrog. But it was like 300 yards from the ponds. You wouldn't think a bullfrog would travel that far away, but it sure sounded like one. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. I kind of put that one in the inconclusive column.
Yes. Well, David, do you consider yourself like a habituator? Do you believe? Yeah, you do. Basically, anyone who lives within a territory and has interactions consistently is generalized as a habituator. But what I want to know is, do you leave gifts or food or anything like that?
Oh, sometimes it depends. If they're interacting good and stuff, like I save my chicken bones and I put them out there, and they usually come to them right away. But if I leave something to them, I call them and they come in. But it's generally I don't leave nothing unless they've been interacting good with me. And then I go out there and I don't carry a gun anymore because if they were going to hurt me, they've had more than enough chances. I can't run because I got this crippled up leg of mine. And so I'll bring them out something. They've got a path that goes right along the north edge of my barn, and it lines up with the dam part of my stock pond that I've got here. They got a trail lines up with the face of the dam. And if you've seen the hillside, there's spots look like there was a big cow laying there. There's other spots you can see where it's had deer. But you can see all these places all over the whole hillside where something with big flat feet mashed the grass down. And it's just all over.
Wow.
There's a bunch of them. There's probably 14 of them that are man size or bigger. And then I'm assuming there's a couple of infants after that.
Okay. Kind of going back to the first episode, how long have you lived at the farm that you live on right now, David? I
moved here May of 2007 at the end of the school year. My daughter still lives.
I'm sorry.
Well, that was back when my daughter was still in school and whatnot, and when we moved here, we didn't move here till the end of the school year. And we've lived here for several years, and it was I lived here for 6 years before I ever seen one. But now I heard a lot of weird, crazy coyotes calling at night. And it was, when you hear more than 20 of them, they can be somewhat intimidating.
Of
course.
You
take that many, they could eat you alive.
Okay, I have to ask you, did you know anything about Bigfoot or believe in them before you had your sighting?
Well, I believed in them. I've seen the Patterson film. I still believe that to be authentic. Because that one looks very similar to the ones here, at least in the face. Like where the facial hair is, the skin color, the nose shape. Because like in June, I had a face-to-face with about a 9-foot-tall male.
Oh.
I stepped in the kitchen. He was right there on the other side of the window. And we kind of, if the glass wasn't there, I could have reached out and touched him. He was that close. But, we kind of locked eyes a little bit, and he's all black, and it's night, so he kind of turned to the side, and that was it. He was gone. So, yeah,
was he looking at you or just looking in when you caught him?
Looking in the window, which that particular window looked into the kitchen. And I kind of got a funny story. You know those rakes? Kind of like the ones you see in the Tom and Jerry cartoon where Tom steps on it and goes splat right into his face?
Yeah.
I had a rake like that leaned up against the handrail that goes up to my deck. And it'd been there a while, and one day I come out, and the rake flipped over. Well, and I looked, and I could see some spots where wasn't nothing you could cast or anything, but you could tell where something with about 16-inch feet had been standing, and you could see the flat spots where it had been through, and it was window peeking. They do that. And,
yes, they do.
You could just kind of envision in your mind how you got this Bigfoot, it jumps the fence, comes in the backyard, and it's sneaking up, going to look in the window, and right about as it's focusing on what's in the house, it takes a step down, and this rake comes up the side, probably about jumped out of its skin.
I've got to share a story with you. I used to have a dog named Cookie. She was a half Chihuahua, half Rat Terrier, and she was a little bitty thing. And I think she had some Pomeranian in her, too, because she had like a curly tail, but she knew no fear. And anyway, I was recording out of my bedroom window, but I was on the other side of the house at the time on the computer, and behind me was a doggy door. Well, she heard something bump up against the house and took off out the door. Well, I didn't know until the next day when I listened to the recording that something had come up to the window, had walked up there quadrupedally, and had bumped into the house. And then when she come running out barking, it growled and ran away, but it was a big, deep growl. Lauren, what are you doing over there, hon?
I'm not doing anything. I'm listening.
Oh, you're not?
With my listening ears.
Okay. Well, I'm just hearing a lot of strange artifact noise. Well, anyway, this little dog chased off something huge. And I just couldn't believe it was possible. And no one could believe it was possible till they heard the recording. So, yeah, there are some very funny things that happen out there with Sasquatch. I've heard of them watching TV through the window. And someone had said they were watching Planet of the Apes, and when they had the one ape on hanging it upside down, or I don't remember what it was, but then they heard this yelling and running off. I don't know if it's a true story or not, but but I have heard that they will stand outside a window and watch TV.
Well, we've had that here.
Really?
My roommate was watching TV, and my hound dog was standing next to him looking out the window, wagging. He turned to look. There's 3 sets of glowing eyes, and, of course, when they were busted, they all scattered.
Uh-huh.
But they were watching TV.
Do you think that it's a possibility that the people that had the place before you had a relationship with the Sasquatch?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Their relatives own property that's right across the road. And I was talking with one of the guys. He goes back there and cuts firewood. And now he's never had any encounters. A lot of other people in the neighborhood have never had any encounters. But about 30 years ago, 10 miles north of here, there had been a rash of sightings. And I've talked with some people, and there was a guy that talked about a turkey hunter who was out, and he seen a Bigfoot and said it started whacking away on a tree with another branch, and then another one replied, and I guess he said, "That's it. I ain't hunting there no more. They can have them darn turkeys. I'm done." But apparently he took off out of there in a hurry after he seen that. And if I drive down a lot of the gravel roads here, you see the, stick structure type stuff just about everywhere you go. But where I'm at, the way it is it's rolling hills. There's not a lot of row crops around. There's more pastures with cattle and horses, and then a lot of hardwood forest. So food is abundant. And then they've got all these stock dams around that were built like right after the end of the Second World War, and they're pretty abundant around here too. They had that deal with the WPA to put soldiers back to work, where they had a deal. If you followed some certain government regulations, they'd pay for half of the cost of building a stock. I think you had to fence it off for 5 years and not let livestock in it or something like that. But, I can look on a satellite map, and there's probably at least 10 ponds within a mile radius of my house.
Yeah.
And then creeks and stuff, too. And they follow the water. So you drive down like a gravel road. One thing that I look for is, you got to think predator. So if there's a creek, you're going to find their trail on the high side. Wherever the high bank side is, where their trail will be. And one thing I see a lot of is real close to the creek, there's a game trail where looks like a lot of deer have been going. But you'll see where the barbed wire is all knocked down right close to the creek there. And then there will be almost like a 4-foot wide path there. I find that very common. Now, deer...
Have you ever... I'm sorry, go ahead and finish. I have another question for you.
Because the deer, they'll follow a trail that's about a foot wide as far as where you're going to find the prints. I usually don't see them like that 4 feet wide. Now, that's something I find pretty common in my area.
What about cows? Do cows leave wide trails like that?
Oh, I'm sure they could, but, this is where there's barbed wire fence and wood.
Oh, I see.
Not where you've got the pasture and stuff. Those are usually left intact, but the ones where it's just woods, I find it very common where the barbed wire is actually knocked down, especially real close to the creek, like within a post or two of the creek. So now one thing, if you're going to look for Bigfoot tracks, if you see the deer trail, you want to look further uphill to try and find where the deer or the Bigfoots are going to leave their tracks. Kind of think predator. If you're going to ambush something or hunt something, it's a lot easier to run downhill than it is uphill. So,
yes, definitely.
And
have you ever had a terrifying experience, David? I mean, where you just really thought about moving?
Oh, I wouldn't move. I figured the Indians learned how to live in peace with them, that I could too.
I mean,
when my dog jumped the fence to go out into the darkness after something, and he come in smelling like Bigfoot, now they could have killed him, but they didn't.
Yes.
And because instead of hurting my dog, it had been real apparent that they had pet him. He stunk to heaven, and I had to give him a bath, but everything washed off. But it had that smell. Now, you could tell it was an adult male that had pet him because it had the skunk scent. When I let him in, he kind of had this you could smell skunk, and then it smelled like burnt smoke balls, and a smell like a sweaty horse. If you combine them, it had that musky, sweaty horse smell, but then it had that real sulfury kind of smell like you get from burnt fireworks, like from the smoke balls. And then it had an undertone of skunk. Now, I figured out that, it's the big males that are out hunting deer and stuff. They're the only ones that seem to use the skunk. And it makes sense. Deer hunter goes out, and he's going to wait to try and ambush something that's coming by. They get stuff to change their scent. Well, when you're a big old smelly Wookiee in the woods, you kind of got to use what's available. And I think they use skunk. I've heard people say, well, they have a gland that secretes that. And I think, really? And what evidence is there of that? Like, we don't have one of them. How would they?
Yeah.
That's the problem with the Bigfoot community. There's more speculation than BS and actual facts to back it up with a lot of things.
Well, that's true.
And
that's
a lot
true,
of people a lot of people don't realize that, like where I'm at, for example, a good 60% of the sightings we have, they're moving on all fours. They're more like a gorilla in that aspect for navigating through the forest and everything. They're not always walking standing upright. And when they do that, they kind of have their hands sort of flat. And that's why some of your footprints can kind of look distorted. And it kind of explains why they'd have extra toes, because a lot of what you're seeing is actually composite print. Because especially like when the leaves are crunchy and stuff, they move on all fours. And with their hand, they kind of drag their hand a little bit and get the crunchy stuff out, so when the foot comes down out where the handprint was, then they're not making all this noise, so they can be quieter. Because you ever notice how many times you see there's a footprint from a Bigfoot, it's in the forest, you got 2 inches of leaf litter, but there's a bald spot in the ground there, it just happens to be where its foot is, and how that seems kind of odd and out of place. It's because he was on all fours.
I've never noticed. I've never noticed.
Yeah, because they'll have their hand, they'll tuck their thumb in, and then they'll have their, just kind of squeeze your fingers up into a fist and put your hand down, and then where the weight goes is where you'll see that what appears to be that mid-tarsal break. It's not that they got a special joint in their foot. It's that it's a composite track. He was going on all fours, and they first put the hand down, and then the foot comes down where the handprint was, and because it's broader and wider, it doesn't sink as deep as the heel of the hand does, and then you get what looks like they've got a mid-tarsal break, when in fact it's just a composite print from them walking on all fours. And I think that's also a lot better explanation for where some say they've got 6 or 7 toes and whatnot.
Right.
A lot of times it's that composite print.
Yeah, would you believe they could possibly have less than 5 toes?
Well, I finally got a calf in June from a young male that was about 6'6". And it was only a 13-inch track, but finally got one in some mud along the driveway. And when we went to check on the cast, we seen him walk across the farmyard and then down the hill. And he was walking upright. And he was about 6'6", and he was coming from the direction where the mulberry tree was, and they were kind of right. So I think he was over there getting them. Because they hit him. It's like as soon as they get right, they'll go and they'll pick off every berry with color that they can reach.
Yes.
Well, and they get my pieces. I give up trying to grow tomatoes one year I had 8 plants of cherry tomatoes. And you know how they grow. I only got 6 tomatoes off of that.
Oh my goodness.
Off of 8 plants. Oh yeah, as soon as they get ripe, they'd snipe them.
Oh my goodness. Have you ever seen a Sasquatch in quadrupedal mode running?
Yes, one time. I've seen 3 of the big males. Oh, yeah. God. I had, one night, I had waited till after dark to burn some trash because, you know, the wind went down after it got dark. And I could hear them carrying on in the area. And I went and sat out on my deck, and I've got like a 2-person restaurant booth that I'd sit in. And I was just kind of listening. And my garage comes off from the basement right next to the deck. And I'm sitting out there, and I turned off all the electronics in the house and stuff so there wouldn't be any other noise, so I could just listen. And I started hearing this sound. Well, I didn't really hear the sound, but I heard the sound of the kitchen window kind of vibrating, like from a bass-type sound. And like if you go outside and you got a TV close to the window, however, if the TV's turned up, you hear the window rattle. It was like that. And then all of a sudden, I heard this one take off. So he must have been right up there at the garage peeking around, and he was hitting me with that infrasound stuff. And it made all the hair on my arms stand up and on the back of my neck. But he just took off like the devil was after him. And in the time it took me to stand up and try and shine the spotlight, he'd cross the yard, crossed the road, crossed a ditch, went over a barbed wire fence that was probably 5 feet high, never missed a step, and these big heavy footsteps kept coming down till they almost merged into one. And he got way out there like about 400 yards, and I heard a big branch break. But
wow.
I talked to a fella who is a retired sheriff, and he told me that he had talked with another law enforcement officer where they went to check up on a peeping Tom, and it turned out to be a Bigfoot, and he was running down the side of the road, and with their radar, they had him clocked at running over 50 miles an hour.
Wow, I can believe that. I've heard that. They're just supernaturally fast.
That was like a 9-foot tall male. Now here, the adult males are a full 12 foot tall. They must be practically 7 feet wide at the shoulders. Their arms are as big around as I am.
Oh my goodness!
And when you see one of them big males on all fours is too big to hide behind my pickup, and it's got a topper that's like 7 feet tall. And that's when them big males are on all fours. They got no problem looking over the top of a 7-foot topper.
Well, how long were you living on the farm before you realized that you had Sasquatch there? Not before you saw one. Did you know before you saw one that you had Sasquatch around?
Not for sure.
Okay.
You know,
and so, but you were already having some strange things happen as soon as you moved in, or was it several years?
Well, when I moved here, I had that feeling like of being watched all the time.
Okay, yes. All right.
And you couldn't shake that. But, you know, you hear a lot of that different howling and weird calls and screeches. And one time I heard it started out like a whoop that went into a howl that kind of turned into almost like a fire truck siren sound.
Oh, gosh.
It came from down by the creek. Now, there ain't no way that a fire truck is ever going to get through the thick woods to even get down by the bottom of the creek. So I heard that one time. And other times, you hear it sound like a baby crying out in the woods.
I've heard that myself.
Well,
I've also wondered if their infants don't sound like our infants.
Mm-hmm.
I think they do pretty similar when they're crying. Because I've heard it, and it's like a human baby crying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one time I caught a little bit of a baby crying, and it was crying like a baby that was frustrated trying to get latched onto the nipple, and it isn't quite working out. That type of a cry. Yeah, where they're kind of fussing and frustrated. I've heard that before, and then you hear the barred owl hoo sounds whooping and stuff to cover up the sound of that baby cry.
Mm-hmm.
And like the males, they all seem to use coyotes. They all seem to have about a handful of coyotes with them. I've gotten several recordings where it sounds almost like a werewolf howl, but then it gets all the coyotes going. Now, they do this for, different reasons. Sound off, it can kind of be where you start hearing a bunch of them around you to kind of intimidate you to get the heck out of there. Because I think they feel that they allow us the daytime, so they feel the night belongs to them. And they'll do that at time of night to try and intimidate you so you go inside, because humans spook easy, and then you won't be there and bother them.
Well, you had here we have the same thing. We'll have a very unusual howl, either very bold, loud howl, as followed by the coyotes, which sounds different. Coyotes sound like coyotes, but this howl is definitely something else. And we get that quite a bit. And we came up with this theory that because we never find Sasquatch kills anywhere, and we had a theory that is it possible that the Sasquatch kill a deer, eat what they want, bellow out this big howl, which the coyotes are very close by, and they're just waiting for the dinner bell, basically. Then they come in, they finish off the deer, and then there's no evidence. The coyotes completely dispose of the Bigfoot kill and leave no evidence.
I think for the most part, but what you're not taking into consideration is these big males, the adult males that hunt. They all seem to travel with, here at least, with about a handful of coyotes. Now, they do use them to, intimidate, but they also use them like a shepherd uses dogs to run the deer herds in a circle to maintain a food supply. I've seen this one.
Oh, that's interesting.
I've seen about 20 deer all come running from south to north along the west side of my property. There were about as many coyotes after them. And then behind the coyotes, I seen 3 males, all running on all fours, just really cruising fast through the forest, running the deer. I've only ever seen it once, and it was, I'm thinking it was either in the fall or in the spring because where it was in the summer you can't see because of all the leaves, so it was when the leaves were shed. So it was either in the fall or in the spring. But it was when the leaves were down because I can't see the hill on the west side of the property unless the leaves are down. But I've seen that, and that's, about the most, 3 is the most I've ever seen at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the times. Another time is when I put out some food one night, and I had called them, and this was, the sun was down, and, you know, where you can just barely make stuff out. There was an adult female, and then there was a younger one next to her that had come up for it. And then shortly after that, another adult joined. And it wasn't like, you know, how apes are. Like you see the chimpanzee at feeding time, he's going to grab every last thing he can possibly carry, even using his feet and his toes to try and take extra stuff, because he's a greedy little thing. Now, the Bigfoots aren't like that. It's like, I'll put a coffee can with stuff on the top of a post, and they set the can down, and they just take out of it, and they share. And that's their nature. And I think a lot of the times when people are seeing them and they're thinking they're acting aggressive and stuff, it's because in their culture, they just share. There isn't any greed. There isn't like a pecking order where this one's going to get it and then that one. It's just they just share. And, for example, one man that I interviewed, he told me about an experience he had as a kid. He was out in the woods picking blueberries, and he had 2 buckets of them. And here a Bigfoot approached him. He was a little kid. He was like 8 years old. And he dropped his gun and dropped the buckets and ran. The next day he went back to get his gun, and he gets up there, and one bucket was there, and the other one was gone. So it's like the Bigfoot figured, well, this is my share, so I'll take this. And he left the other bucket for the kid.
Well, David, what do you think they are? Do you have a theory on that?
It's a man of sorts. Think of him as being like a true man of nature. Where we've embraced technology, they've learned to live in harmony with nature. They set up their territories, they manage their game, so they can live in an area. It's like they learn to bend with nature, and we think we got to either conquer, command, or control everything. We're very different in that way. See, a lot of people misjudge their intelligence because they really don't have a use for technology. Think about it. They're perfectly suited to their environment. And, like, for example, with a human, we need a knife. We need the tool of a knife so we can skin a deer and butcher it and everything else. But you look at them, and their sheer brute strength, I'm sure they can rip the hide off a deer just like a person could off a rabbit, just to their sheer strength. So they really don't need it. If they want a leg, they can just pull it off. They don't need the knife. But I did find a stone tool once, and it was a piece of granite, which is the glacier stone that was left here. And it was about 6 inches square, and it was broke off clean on one end. And the other end, where it should have been sharp and whatnot, was where it had been used as a hammer for something, because the actual granite was rounded off. Now, I kept it where I found it. I didn't, it wasn't something that was a Native American tool, because it was on top of the leaf litter of the forest. There wasn't dirt on it. It wasn't half buried in the ground or anything like that. It was on top of dry leaves. And I thought that was pretty cool, and I kept it. Now, when I looked at it, where the hammer surface was, you'd look for different things, like to try and determine what it was being used for. When I looked around, I didn't see, like, stone shards where some other tool was being made with it. I didn't see any broken bones, like if they were smashing deer bones to get the marrow out of them. There would have been a fatty residue on it. There wasn't any of that. if they were crushing hickory nuts with it, you'd expect an oily residue on it, and there wasn't any of that. It was kind of powdery, but that was it. So I don't know if it had just been dry there or if they'd been working on making a stone tool. Now, here they'll swipe my machete all the time. They usually bring it back, and it's usually kind of bent up a little bit, but they usually return it. And then you'll get a time where they don't, but most of the time they do.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What I was going to ask you, do you feel that you pretty much have it all figured out, or do you feel that it seems like the further on you go, the more mysterious it becomes?
Well, we're only scratching the surface of that, I'm convinced. You know, these creatures seem to be able to understand our language, but we don't really quite understand theirs. And, you know, the more you get into it, it seems like the more different calls you hear, you find different kinds of stick structures. There's been a couple of times where I've seen an orb high up in the trees. It seems to be like somewhere between the size of a softball and the size of a cantaloupe. And it's bright white. But the weird thing about it is, unlike what you would expect, it doesn't radiate any light. If that makes any sense to you.
Yes, it does.
You know, like a flashlight will radiate light out from it. It was just bright white, like a bright white sphere, and that's what you saw. It was the round sphere. There wasn't like that little light that comes off. No light radiation at all, which I found was weird. And they only last, you know, like about 5 seconds, and then they just turn off or whatever, like you flip the switch. I've seen them a couple times.
Is it usually at the same time that Sasquatch are in the area?
Well, they seem to keep a pretty good eye on me, so, and I'm not
They're
too far
always in the area.
Well, I think where they bent down and stuff is within about a half mile of where I live. So that makes it where they're around quite a bit. Sneak out.
Okay, I have
for a second here and listen and see if I hear anything.
Okay. Well, we have 5 minutes, 50 seconds before the show's over.
Okay. Well, did I tell you about the time where I got growled at by one that was in the barn?
You may have mentioned it on the last show, but I don't recall. Well, tell us about it.
Well, one night I was going to take out a snack to the females, and the way my barn is, it's kind of like a pole barn, and it's got a high section in the center, and there's like 3 bays that face towards the south. You know, where the center one would be like for where you'd put your hay, and then it's got like lean-tos coming off it. And then there's also a lean-to coming off it on the north side, and it's got one of those sliding doors. I was taking a snack out to the girls, and I got by that open bay, and there was this growl that kind of sounded like a cross between a big dog and a bear or something. And it came from up by the ceiling, which is over 10 foot high. And, you know, it was kind of like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
It's where you got to think fast. So what I ended up doing, I turned he was in there, and I was by the opening, and he felt trapped. So I had to take away the threat. So I turned my back to him and then just acted like he wasn't there. I put the snack on the pole and turned around and walked past the open door, probably a little faster than I normally walk. And then I got going up towards the house, and, you know, at first it showed him that I wasn't trying to trap him, and then it showed him that I trusted him not to hurt me. And by just kind of ignoring him, it just let him know that I really didn't care he was there. I accepted it. And that's kind of how we get along.
Wow. Your stories have been absolutely amazing, David. I really find them fascinating.
Oh, and they've come into the house a few times. I remember the first time that happened, they forced the basement door open, and the basement door is here. Well, it's an old house. It's one of those Z-bar doors where you got all the vertical planks, and then it's got like the Z pattern on the one side.
Yes.
It's nailed to, you know, to give a good support. Okay, basement door is a Z-bar door, and I had it kind of propped shut with a 2x10 hooked under one of those Z's, so it, you know, cinch it up good and tight. Well, I'm sitting in the living room in my chair, and I hear this door get forced open. And, of course, the dogs go insane. So you scrape yourself off the ceiling. And I grabbed the shotgun and went out the front door. And the garage kind of basically goes in that basement level. So I went around the house. Nothing there, come up in through the house, nothing. Now, a person couldn't have gotten away that fast.
Right.
And I didn't see nothing.
Huh.
I don't know.
Crazy.
Well, I remember one time I used to have this addiction. It was called Battle Pirates. And I was playing that on Facebook. And I was kind of, and I could hear the foot outside, and they were doing their owl-like calls. And a lot of times they do that, and then I'd go out and exchange calls with them, and that was all neat and cool. And sometimes I'd leave them a snack or whatever. Well, I was kind of ignoring them because there was a raid event going on where you could get a different neat ship or whatever you didn't have for playing Battle Pirates, so I'm doing that. Kind of ignoring them, and pretty soon walnuts start hitting the side of the house. So I go out there and I say, "Oh, do you want a little goodie?" And I bring it out, leave it. Never heard another peep the other night. You know, the rest of the night. But now that's something else they do too. Sometimes, like when I get ready to go to bed, I'd go in my room and turn the light on, turn the light off, and you just get snuggled into bed, and then you hear these extremely loud owl calls right outside your window.
Oh, my goodness.
And you go out there, because it's them. It's the females doing that. And you go, "Did you come to see me?" And then they'll call back to you and interact and leave them a little snack, and they're happy for the rest of the night. So
well, David, David, we've run out of time. We're actually not streaming anymore. We're in archive. So
okay.
I do need to end the show, and I want to thank you again for coming on and continuing to tell us the most fascinating events that are going on with you. And I want you to stay in touch. And we'd like to have you back again in the future.
Sure.
Because I know you have more. I know you have a lot more to tell. So, but I want to thank you so much for coming on. Everyone out there, don't forget the eclipse tonight. You don't want to miss it. next week we have Michael Cook from Kentucky at 8:30 Sunday night live. So we want to thank all of you for listening to Nite Callers Bigfoot Radio. So everyone, say good night.
Good night.
Good night. And thanks again, David.
You bet.